Revolution Radio. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Thank you, Nighthawk, and welcome back to Dave and Mackie's Shiny Side Out on a beautiful Sunday today, 23rd of July. Show number 594. Is that right? 594?
593.
That's what I said. 593. 593. That's what I said. That's woo, whoosh. 390 and 500. Well, we're not far from 600. So look, we've been talking about language confusion, and we're going to continue talking about language confusion. In fact, we will talk about language confusion until I would say we probably hit show number 600, because there just seems to be more stuff propping up. Now, we talked about the language confusion in mythology. We talked about how languages were supposed to have come about, scientifically speaking, and there's still no theory. I mean, there are many theories, but there's not one single convincing theory as to how language is actually formed and diversified, etc., etc. And a lot of, if not all, mythologies speak of a single language that everybody understood and spoke. Well, not really spoke, but there was one language, they say, one language and everybody understood each other, which was then taken away as a form of punishment in some mythologies, and in other mythologies it just went away for some reason, which is interesting because that actually lends a lot more credence to that event happening, because yes, some people were punished and they knew what they were being punished for, and that's why it's part of their mythology, whereas other people on the planet had no idea what was going on, but also found their language confused, which I find very compelling, to be honest with you. What we're going to suppose, though, or stipulate here is that telepathy may in fact have been the original language that we all had, right? A transfer of images, feelings, concepts, etc., rather than clumsy words, which can be misinterpreted in many ways, especially if you don't speak the same language, right? But even if you speak the same language, deception and even unintended miscommunications can occur, even if you speak the same language, because words can only go so far. Imagine you had a fight with your spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it might be, and rather than having to resort to words, you could actually let them know how you feel. Exactly, like they hear, this is actually how I feel about the whole thing. And the thing is this, we can't really see anything from anybody else's point of view, ever, right? Not really. We can try, but not really. Whereas with telepathy, you could. Because if our minds were connected, you could see an event from my point of view, because I will just tell you what it, or will not tell you, I will let you know what it's like.
That's right.
Right? So communication, so for me, this kind of communication is and there are other indications that it might have been telepathy as well. But is telepathy, in fact, real? Now, we've spoken about artificial telepathy, and Solaris is really an expert in that field as well. She's done a lot of work around psychotronics. There you go, jinx. Yeah, and she's done. If you haven't seen her documentaries or read her books, if you're interested, then please do go ahead and take a look, because it's rather interesting. So yes, we looked at psychotronics. And this artificial telepathy is something that people are actively working on, right? They've Elon Musk's Neuralink, for example, right? Other people, thinking about chips, putting chips into your brain. And look, it's actually really good in certain instances, like if you're quadriplegic, for example, for argument's sake, or you have cystic fibrosis or whatever it might be, and your body just shuts down on you, right? So you can no longer do anything. Imagine if you had a chip, in your brain, or some kind of interface that allows you to still get around and still partake in life and still communicate, etc., etc. Wouldn't that be awesome? Right? I think it would be, to be honest, right? In those circumstances. Now there are, of course, many other sinister applications as well, which we have to be wary of, or wary rather, and then we will be weary. Once we're wary, we'll be weary. But it's really something to consider seriously. Artificial telepathy. Okay, so, but what about real telepathy? Dave and I spent quite a bit of time, and we're not getting there quite yet, but we spent a bit of time on the CIA FOI, Freedom of Information Disclosure site.
Mm-hmm.
For all the good that it did us. No, but actually, no, there was quite a bit of information, to be honest with you, and we're going to share that with you as part of the show cycle. But there have been other investigations into actual telepathy, and then also into the more scientific, if you will, areas or investigative methods that have been used. Now, this next study here we're going to share with you was conducted in 2008, from July to December, by the International Journal of Yoga. It's that's where it was published, but it was conducted in India, right? So, investigating paranormal phenomena, functional brain imaging of telepathy. I think we'll just take these in turn, Dave.
Sure.
We're going through the abstract. Yeah. So the aim was this: telepathy is defined as the communication of impressions of any kind from one mind to another, independently of the recognized channels of sense. Meta-analyses of Ganz field studies, as well as card-guessing task studies, provide compelling evidence for the existence of telepathic phenomena. The aim of the study was to elucidate the neural basis of telepathy by examining an individual with this special ability. Now, before I go on, you will say, "Oh, that's nonsense. That has never been proven." Let's hold our judgment here until we look at some of the CIA released papers. Okay, before you start poo-pooing it all. Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
So, materials and methods. Using functional MRI, we examined a famous mentalist while he was performing a telepathic task in a 1.5 T scanner, a 1.5 T scanner. A matched control subject without this special ability was also examined under similar conditions.
The results. The mentalist demonstrated a significant activation of the right parahippocampal gyrus after successful performance of a telepathic task. That's an area in your brain, of course. The comparison subject, who did not show any telepathic ability, demonstrated significant activation of the left inferior frontal gyrus.
Conclusions. The findings of this study are suggestive of a limbic basis for telepathy and warrant further systematic research. Mickey, go ahead.
That's all yours.
Really? Okay.
That's all yours.
No
but
dramas.
Ignore the numbers. Ignore the numbers. Yeah.
All right. Telepathy is defined as the communication of impressions of any kind from one mind to another, independently of the recognized channels of sense. With the help of various rigorous paradigms over the last 70 years, systematic research has lent support to the reality of telepathy. Meta-analysis of Ganz field studies, as well as card-guessing tasks. And if you're a Ghostbusters fan, that was in the beginning, that card-guessing game. Studies provide compelling evidence for the existence of telepathy. I bet that gave you some surprise. This mysterious phenomenon has implications not only in the cognitive sciences, but also in the biological and healing sciences. It has long been assumed that conscious intention has the capacity to affect living systems across a distance. Intercessory prayers, healing energy, and similar other methods have long been a part of medicine. Hence, analysing The underpinnings of telepathy might potentially help in the understanding the distant healing phenomena as well. Also, examining people with extraordinary capabilities involving paranormal phenomena might help in a better understanding of these puzzling entities. Previous such studies examining people with special talents, in inverted commas, yielded significant insights. Similarly, studies have been conducted on people experiencing paranormal phenomena. And functional MRI study on distant intentionality, defined as sending thoughts at a distance, examined the brain activation pattern in a recipient of thoughts from healers who exposed some form for connecting or healing at a distance. The recipient demonstrated significant brain activations in the anterior and in middle cingulate areas, precuneus, and the frontal regions. Previous studies examining subjects with telepathic ability suggested an association of paranormal phenomena with the right cerebral hemisphere. It has been reported that correlated neural signals may be detected by fMRI in the brains of subjects who are physically and sensorily isolated from each other. In light of these previous studies, we aimed to examine the functional neuroanatomical correlates of telepathy in Mr. Jared Senehi, an expert with telepathic ability as a mentalist, using functional magnetic resonance imaging. Becky.
Excuse me. Materials and methods. Subjects. Mr. Jared Senehi, Mr. GS, from here on in the text, aged 46 years, is well known for his abilities to perform various paranormal tasks, such as telekinesis, mind reading, and telepathy. There's a link if you want to share. I'll share the link. Mr. JS, the comparison subject, is a 43-year-old male who was aware of various paranormal phenomena, including telepathy, but did not have any paranormal abilities to the best of his knowledge. Both the subjects were right-handed and possessed master's degrees, so they're university educated. Both the subjects were screened using the general health questionnaire, and a comprehensive mental status examination was done to rule out any psychiatric disorder. Neither of them had any history suggestive of substance abuse or dependence, medical or neurological disorders. Neither had any contraindication for MRI, meaning they could be subjected to MRI. The study procedures were explained to the subjects and written informed consent was obtained. The study protocol was reviewed and approved by the Institute's Ethics Committee.
Telepathy task. One of the investigators, PNJ, drew an image in the presence of other investigators, HRN, BNG, and GVS. Figures 1 and 2 were the images drawn by PNJ for the mentalist and the control subject, while both were seated in separate rooms. Neither the mentalist nor the control subject knew what the image was. The subject was then shifted to the MRI scanner, and the investigator was seated in the MRI control room, as you would functionally understand how they work. Adequate precautions were taken to avoid sensory leakages by following the guidelines of Hyman and Hanorton. During the scan, the subject was instructed to perform the act of telepathy to think about and identify the probable image that would have been drawn by the investigator during the designated epochs of activation, and not to engage in this task during the periods of rest. The subjects were visually cued using a mirror attached to the head coil, which reflected the cues projected on a screen. If you've had an MRI, you lie on your back, you look up, and there's, up at the top there would be a mirror where they can signal to those people. I've actually seen my scans turn up there when I've had an MRI. by green and red stars as to indicate the respective onset of activation and rest epochs. The investigator was also given the same cues and was engaged in transmitting the image to the subject in the MRI scanner during the activation periods, stopping during periods of rest. After the scanning, the subject was asked to draw the image that he was able to obtain by performing telepathy. Figure 1b was the image reproduced by the mentalist, and Figure 2b was the image reproduced by the control. Both the subjects were scanned on the third day of the lunar cycle and at the same time of day, 1400 hours, separated by a 3-month interval.
And part of the paper we're showing with you here has the actual images drawn as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the imaging procedures, MRI was done with 1.5 Tesla magneton vision scanner. First, the T1 weighted 3-dimensional magnetization prepared rapid acquisition gradient echo sequence was performed. There's some technical information, but let's just avoid about that too much. That will be confusing. After obtaining the anatomical MR images, echoplanar images, EPI, were obtained. They consisted of 112 functional acquisitions, with each acquisition consisting of 16 slices, and the slice thickness was about 8 millimeters without any interslice gap in the axial plane covering the entire brain. The parameters for a multi-shot EPI sequence using blood oxygen level dependent BOLD contrast were as follows. Repetition time was 4,000 milliseconds. Echo time 76 milliseconds. Flip angle was 90 degrees. FOV was 250 millimeters, and the matrix was 128 by 128. The acquisitions were grouped in blocks of 8, yielding 14 blocks. The condition for successive blocks alternated between rest and the telepathic task, starting with rest. This rest telepathy paradigm yielded 7 sets of rest and telepathy.
Image analysis. The fMRI analysis was performed using statistical parametric mapping 2, or SPM2. The EPI images were realigned and corrected for slice timing variations. The images were then normalized to the Montreal Neurological Institute, the MNI space. Finally, the images were smoothened and with a Gaussian kernel of 6 millimeters full width, half maximum. The reason why we're reading this out is because this is a repeatable experiment, and that's why they've noted each one of these settings. SMP2 combines the general linear model of Gaussian field theory to draw statistical inferences from bold response data regarding deviations from the null hypothesis in 3-dimensional brain space. The images were analyzed using a block design paradigm with a canonical, oh, I can't really say today.
Canonical.
There you go. Hemodynamic response function. The epochs of rest were subtracted from the epochs of the telepathic task performance. The Voxel-Wise analysis produced a statistical parametric map of brain activation associated with the telepathic task in the MNI space. Significance corrections for multiple comparisons were performed using false discovery rate, or FDR, correctional. P was less than 0.05. The coordinates of significant areas of activation were transformed from the MNI space into stereotactic space. Wow. Using non-linear transforms. The brain regions were localized and coordinates using automated software.
Very good. The results. Now, bear with me. This will... I'll do it slowly. The image reproduced by the mentalist showed striking similarity to the original image drawn by the investigator P&J, whereas the one reproduced by the control subject did not. Okay, now we have the images here.
I've shown the images on the YouTube, yeah.
Oh, thanks, buddy. So figure 1b was produced by the mentalist, and figure 2b was reproduced by the control subject. The mentalist showed significant activation involving the right parahippocampal gyrus. The number of voxels was 126. Talleyrand and Tonneau. Coordinates of peak activation, x was 32, y minus 41, and z was minus 6. T equaled 4.88, and P, uncorrected, stood at less than 0.001. FDR corrected P was in fact at 0.018. Whereas the control subject showed significant activation involving the left inferior frontal gyrus. And the number of voxels was 363, and the Talleyrand and Tonneau coordinates of P activation were x minus 42, y 25, z minus 8, t was 4.21, p uncorrected was again less than 0.01, and corrected p was 0.037. And that brings us to the discussion. Okay?
To our knowledge, this is the first fMRI study to examine the brain correlates of telepathy. Previous studies have employed other functional brain mapping techniques, such as single photon emission computed tomography, or SPECT, and electroencephalography, EEG, and MRI to investigate paranormal phenomena in selected individuals. In our study, telepathy was associated with significant activation of right parahippocampal gyrus, whereas the control subject, without telepathic ability, activated the left inferior frontal gyrus under similar task conditions. A previous study on Mr. Ingo Swann, I remember Ingo Swann, who had the special ability of remote viewing, showed that the proportions of unusual 7 Hz EEG spike and slow wave activity over the occipital lobes per trial had a correlation with the ratings of response accuracy. Neurophysiological and MRI analysis suggested a differential structure and functional organization within the parieto-occipital region of Mr. Swann's right hemisphere. Another SPECT study examined Mr. Sean Harabantz, who routinely experienced flashes of images of objects that were hidden and of accurate personal information concerning people with whom he was not familiar. The extrasensory processes in Mr. Harabantz correlated quantitatively with morphological and functional changes involving the right parietal, far out. Go on.
Parieto-temporal.
Thank you, cortices. Or its thalamic inputs and hippocampal formation. Together, these two studies suggest that paranormal phenomena might have a relationship with the right cerebral hemisphere, especially the right posterior cortical and hippocampal regions. The parahippocampal region is very closely linked to the hippocampus, both structurally and functionally. So, the current study findings also support the association between the right hippocampal system and paranormal phenomena. Meki.
Now, just to think about it, so you understand that the right hemisphere of your brain controls your left side, and the left hemisphere of your brain controls the right side. Mm-hmm. That's just how the brain works.
It's mapped out in reverse, yeah.
Correct. Now, I wonder, and this is just me, let's try this out, so I'm just spitballing everybody. Mm-hmm. What if, or almost demonization of people that are left-handed, as in the word, sinister, which of course is Latin for left, whereas Dexter and dexterous is Latin for right, and that's a good thing, mm-hmm. right? I wonder if that could be, like a long way back, of course, related to the fact that maybe, I'm not saying this is what it is, but maybe left-handed people have a higher aptitude towards ESP, telepathy, etc. than right-handed people. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just putting it out there. It's because it seems that the right hemisphere of the brain is more active here. Now, in our study, the control subject activated his left inferior frontal gyrus during his unsuccessful telepathic task performance. This brain area is implicated in the theory of mind. The attribution of mental states, such as desires, intentions, and beliefs, to others has been referred to as TOM, theory of mind. Empathy, conceptually related to TOM, is described as the ability to infer and share the emotional experiences of another. An earlier study reported that psychic mind readers had greater cognitive empathy than individuals without these abilities. Importantly, hippocampal brain regions are important for empathy. Thus, our observations derive indirect support from this earlier study. Superior empathizing abilities have been hypothesized to be important for both telepathy as well as for distant intentionality. That, in my mind, makes perfect sense, so that's me talking about. Interestingly, returning to the text, the cuneus, a brain region associated with empathy, has been reported to be linked with distant intentionality. Also, in our study, the hippocampal region associated with empathy is implicated in telepathy. These observations support the hypothesized link between empathy and special abilities. It is possible that people with telepathy or distant healing abilities might possess the ability to activate differentially specific brain regions in localization, e.g. anterior versus posterior brain regions, or in lateralization, e.g. right versus left brain, related to the empathy circuit in comparison to individuals without these abilities. Dave?
On the contrary, not against you, but this is in the text. Empathy deficits and cuneus and parahippocampal abnormalities and anomalous right hemisphere overactivation have been reported in schizophrenia. Most of these left hemisphere dominance failure findings have been conceptualized as being abnormal in their tendency to increase a person's proclivity towards psychosis. Paradoxically, evolutionary theories on psychosis propose an alternative possibility that some of these traits might be of crucial utility. It has been proposed that that this dominance failure and consequent right hemisphere overaction facilitates the emergence of paranormal and delusion-like ideas by way of right hemispheric associative processing characteristics, i.e., coarse rather than focused semantic activation. Interestingly, the ability to detect subtle magnetic field energies might underlie paranormal phenomena. Moreover, magnetic field abnormalities have been described to be the underlying basis for psychotic symptoms. However, it is yet to be examined whether a conglomeration of these features, i.e., reduced left hemispheric dominance, paranormal beliefs, etc., are also indicative of an inherent advantage towards acquiring special, in air quotes, abilities in some people, of course with enhancement towards psychosis in others, possibly due to an enhanced tendency to perceive subtle geomagnetic energy alterations. Meki.
Ours is probably the first fMRI study to examine the neuroanatomical correlates of telepathy. fMRI offers methodological advantages of non-radioactive and non-invasive real-time imaging of the brain. We have employed a well-researched and validated image analysis paradigm with optimal correction for false positive results. Our study methodology strictly adhered to the guidelines for research on paranormal phenomena proposed by Hyman and Honiton. These include rigorous precautions against sensory leakage, extensive security procedures and equipment, and complete specifications about statistical analysis. Nonetheless, one has to be cautious while interpreting the study findings due to the following limitations. 1. Ideally, it would have been methodologically more rigorous if Mr. Gerard had replicated the successful telepathic task with similar brain activation during another session of fMRI on a different occasion. As Mr. Gerard had reported some inexplicable discomfort in the few days following the fMRI, this could not be done. 2. Examination of just one control subject is another limiting factor.
Oh boy, conclusions. In summary, this study's findings are suggestive of an association between telepathy and the right para-hippocampal gyrus. The methodological rigor isolated and robust brain activation with telepathy and established theoretical relevance of this brain region with reference to paranormal phenomena highlight the need for further studies using advanced fusion imaging techniques, simultaneous fMRI and EEG, and magnetoencephalography. I did it. To examine telepathy.
Now, you know what I find interesting with this particular study is the link it seems to draw between psychosis, schizophrenia, and ESP, as it were, or paranormal abilities, as we like to call them. I like to call them normal abilities because I used to say what's normal, what's not normal. But it makes sense in many ways because let's look at this from a point of view of catch-all. I want to catch everybody that shows any
psychic
abilities at all. Right?
Sure.
So what do? I call it schizophrenia. And in fact, in some people, the brain activation or the brain activity that leads to ESP or other paranormal phenomena does indeed cause schizophrenia or psychosis. Therefore, I can catch it all. Beautiful. Right? I wonder if the prophets of old did have a similar or would have had a similar brain scan
disposition. Yes.
Yeah. To these subjects, right? So, and is it not also possible that because, especially in schizophrenia, which is sort of a dissociative condition where you can no longer tell reality from fantasy in many cases. Similar, I guess. Again, psychosis can be different, but is it not possible that these people are hooking into other layers of reality that is simply not visible to us? But I guess similar to autism, the ability to perceive these other realms of existence or other sensory inputs, as it were, almost render them incapable of
normal functioning
meaningfully in our world.
Yeah, that's right. So right? I'm gonna maybe wrap it in a different way. So if suddenly, let's just say if suddenly any one of you listening suddenly heard all the radio stations that are currently playing simultaneously, but without being able to focus on any particular one, or your dial just randomly scrolled through the broadcast from each one, you would have to question your sanity by this point. If suddenly you had the ability to do it. Let's put it that way. So, for someone who's practiced, because remember we don't have an instruction manual on how to do this, as someone who's practiced or discovered they have a gift of some kind, practiced it and gotten to a point where they can utilize the tool if you consider it a tool, and they've made it an effective vehicle for whatever pursuit they have. So if you're a con man, for instance, if you're a con artist, I should say, then it might be particularly useful, where your onslaught of thoughts is to purvey safety and assurance if you did that, right? If you use that tool to then do a bad deed. Magicians use a ton of different tricks up their sleeve to be able to fool us, and I'm using a tool from my very favourite Penn and Teller, to be able to do something. Now, if, like I've said before, if you were, for instance, in a situation where there were psychic people about, you might get those activations yourself. Your brain might be smart enough to turn those on and off for you. Because it's like your phone. My phone has a smart Wi-Fi setting, Mackie, so it doesn't turn on my Wi-Fi unless I'm at a given location, because it senses the Wi-Fi I wish to talk to. That makes sense? Only in the presence of that Wi-Fi does it want to communicate. So I think maybe there's a way. Maybe our brains have the ability. Maybe this study suggests that there's something to it, and maybe, just maybe, there is. Maybe we can all do it. Maybe we can't. Maybe we can't all do it. Maybe we can. Maybe some people have a predisposition to having it turned on, but without training couldn't turn it off.
That is possible. I like to think that we all have the native ability, pending, of course, the switching on of certain enzymes and other maybe genetic markers for us to, again, because we have to reverse, in order to use it again, clearly everybody at one point, if telepathy was in fact the true origin language,
yep,
that means everybody at some point would have been able to use it, right? Because that's how we all spoke, apparently. Now, having said that, we need to figure out now what actually was, what was it that caused the loss of this ability, if indeed we lost it. And I have my money on some virus, not a bacterium, but I think a virus, probably a retrovirus that carried certain genetic markers, genetic material, that it then spliced into our DNA as like a cork, if you will.
Yeah.
That would prevent the activation of whatever DNA fragments were needed to turn on. And it did so in live subjects. The genetic engineering was done, as we can do today, by the way, with our CRISPR tool, right?
That's right.
It was done on people, because they all reported, well, one day they could talk to each other, and the next they couldn't. So,
yeah.
So whatever was done, it was done with some form of in vivo genetic engineering methodology, which I find endlessly fascinating in and of itself, of course. But it's fascinating. Now, there's actually the next article refers to the study we just read out, and it was published in Psychology Today in 2018. Okay, so it's direct relation to the study, and it's just a commentary, if you will. And it was put together by Srini Pillai, MD, and it was reviewed by Libby Ma, posted April 22nd, 2018. The biology of telepathy, is brain-to-brain communication possible? Here is what research finds. Extrasensory perception refers to information that is perceived outside of the five senses. This includes phenomena such as telepathy, clairvoyance, and knowledge of future events. Since these phenomena cannot be overtly seen or measured, they often regarded as unbelievable. However, recent research explores the possible biological mechanisms behind such phenomena. Mirror neurons. Telepathy refers to communication outside of the known senses. Many studies have demonstrated that we can read other people's minds because we have neurons that act as automatic mirrors. In fact, we can grasp the intentions and emotions of others automatically. In 2007, psychology professor Gregor Domes and his colleagues found evidence that the ability to interpret subtle social cues can be enhanced by oxytocin, a hormone that increases trust in social approach behavior. It is not such a stretch to imagine that we can pick up the emotional intentions of others around us, but can this be done when long distances separate people, Dave?
Yeah, long distance communication. Another 2014 study conducted by psychiatrist Carles Grau and his colleagues found that the brain-to-brain communication via the internet is possible. In my book, the author says, tinker, dabble, doodle, try. Unlock the power of the unfocused mind. He says, I describe an experiment in which they proved that a person thinking of the words hola or ciao in India could communicate this to people in Spain without saying it out loud, or being seen, or typing it. Information can, in fact, be transmitted across large distances when the internet is the highway that connects two people.
And that's of course, the psychotronic study we talked about earlier. Right? Invisible communication. In 2005, biologist Rupert Sheldrake, he's quite famous actually, and his research associate Pam Smart recruited 50 experimental participants through the website. They also included 4 potential emailers, and 1 minute before a prearranged time, the participants had to guess who would send it. Of 552 trials, 50% of the guesses were correct. This was much higher than the 25% one would have expected if this finding were just due to chance. In 2008, psychiatrist Ganesan Venkatasubramanian and his colleagues conducted a brain imaging study, the one we just discussed with you, in which they prepared images for a mentalist, someone who was purportedly telepathic, and a control subject. The mentalist was able to produce an image very similar to the one prepared for him, whereas the control subject was not. These investigators have demonstrated that when the mentalist was successful, the right para-hippocampal gyrus, PHG, was activated, whereas it was not activated in the other person. Instead, the left inferior frontal gyrus was activated. This finding was similar to a prior study as well. Dave?
Animal? Is that where we are?
Yeah.
Yes, good. Animal telepathy. The biologic predisposition to the transfer of thoughts is not thought to be limited to humans. When flocks of birds turn seemingly automatically or wheel together, as it might be known, this quick inference from all birds at the same time is thought to be similar to telepathy. I mentioned this before in the last show.
Yep.
In 2017, experimental physicist Jura Demsar and a computer scientist Iztok Lebar-Bajek demonstrated that such group behavior may in part be explained by language-related fuzzy rule-based computational systems. I think they just made all that up. This suggests that there may be a built-in logic behind group behavior. They do not necessarily transcend the laws of nature. I wonder how much they got paid for that study.
Plenty.
It's like a statement of work I've read recently.
Fuzzy rule-based computational systems. Of course, caution in interpretation. We always have to be cautious in how we interpret things. I agree. The sample sizes in these studies are very small, and the findings have not been well replicated. The ability to duplicate findings is a far more complex issue than we can deal with in this blog, or the blog we're sharing with you. But suffice it to say that many scientists do believe that replication of any such finding is statistically feasible. If these findings are indeed unfounded, one group of researchers has demonstrated that people who have such beliefs differ from those who don't, due to genetic differences in dopamine transmission. Greater dopamine availability was found in those people who had a greater propensity for unfounded beliefs. This suggests that different chemistry may underlie different belief systems, but it does not necessarily imply pathology. Dave?
Hypotheses. Based on this preliminary research, the following hypotheses would be fair. 1. Our brains are wired to pick up subtle social cues. Gee, that's really thin. 2. Our brains are wired to automatically reflect intentions and emotions in the presence of others. Still thin. 3. For our brains to connect across large distances, we have to be dialed into a frequency similar to whatever an internet connection allows. It's close. 4. If people have the capacity for telepathy, some people may be more capable than others. I believe that to be true. And 5. The hippocampal and parahippocampal brain regions may be involved in the telepathic communication, since they are involved in integrating memories and subtle aspects of language communication, e.g. sarcasm. Number 6, ESP could depend on fast inference, which requires more openness to another and implied by oxytocin study. While these hypotheses remain unproven, there is certainly sufficient evidence to pursue them with interest to see if they hold up to the scientific method. In the meanwhile, what can you do?
And there actually here are some suggested actions which we're going to share with you. Know with your close friends if what you sense they're feeling is what they are actually feeling. Ask them if they're feeling what you sense. 2. Improve on what you are sensing. Do things that may increase your oxytocin. For example, hugging them may increase your oxytocin. And being hugged may increase yours. Play the email game, number 3. Every 4 hours, guess who might be sending you an email? Jot this down to see how often you're correct. 4. Since more dopamine activity is associated with more unfounded beliefs, try the prior experiments after a rewarding activity that would increase dopamine. For example, after working out. See if your prediction abilities are better. 5. Try out long-distance experiments and check in with others to see if you can feel what they're feeling. You will not be able to generalize the truth through the experiments, but you will likely enjoy the results of your curiosity. Besides, some research indicated that being curious may be associated with a longer life. That is true. Now, the next article
so
is
thin.
Yeah, of course it is.
Yeah.
What else can they suggest at this point? Right?
That's right.
The truth is, if you do want to test yourself out, you can start with simple experiments like simple cards showing simple basic shapes. If you feel that you have telepathic ability, get someone to hold the cards up, not to you, to themselves, and then see if you can jot down what you think those cards are. Because that would mean that you're now perceiving what that person is perceiving, and that, of course, is telepathy. Other than that, you can try to reach people, from a long distance off. See if you can reach out to them. See if they think about you. And the funny thing is this. Now, I know this is anecdotal, not scientific method and all that. I get it. But I know that when my mom was alive, I would call her and she said, "I was just thinking about you. I was thinking about you." And it happened to me as well, but I was thinking about her, or even I was thinking about someone, and not always, of course.
Yeah.
More often than not, that person would get somehow to contact me, SMS, phone call, whatever.
Yep.
That's a thing that I have experienced. You have, I know you have as well, Dave. So these are things we have experienced. Now, does it conclusively prove either way? No, of course it doesn't. Now, the next article is important. It's called Super Cooperators, but we won't be able to do justice today. But I want to just diverge very slightly onto a track here. This is what I want you to think about, both you, Dave, as well as our esteemed listeners. What if the technology with which we are confronted by phenomena such as UFOs, UAPs, abductions, etc., and bear in mind that a lot of people report an irrational sense of fear that seems to come over them for no good reason. I mean, they're seeing like these orbs, for example, or other phenomena, right? And there's this sense of dread they're suddenly feeling, completely irrational, but nonetheless there it is. So can we then assume, but if it's a stretch, I hear you, can we assume that these phenomena, these orbs, these UAPs, or associated observations and artifacts, have the ability to project at us. And don't forget, a lot of abductees have reported mind-to-mind communication.
That's true.
With those that abducted them, right? So, again, all right, all of this coming together to me solidifies into the one statement that I think telepathy really was our original language, right? Because we are receivers, because you feel it. And is it not also true? And again, this is slightly different, but is it not also true that you enjoy a movie more when you're in cinema with a whole bunch of other people?
Yeah, the collective experience.
The collective
is
experience.
Definitely important.
Now, there's something that is unique to Germany, I think. And I was young. In summer, specifically in summer during the school holidays, right?
Uh-oh.
Every Saturday, there was, not every Saturday, but every second or so Saturday, the second, I think it was the second German television channel, would give people the choice between 3 movies. And you could dial in, and then, whichever movie received the most votes by a phone from the entire German population, that movie would be shown.
Nice.
More often than not, my movie would be shown, which made me feel very good. In fact, I can't remember a time when my movie wasn't shown, but I'm not saying that I influenced it. But Germans, specifically on a Saturday night, had very profound combined experiences. So there was those movies, but there were also these game shows that were on, and there was something called the Straßenfeger, which was a TV series, usually a 3-parter or 4-parter, which would be shown on a Saturday between 8 and 10. It was usually a 2-hour thing, but everybody in Germany, like when I say everybody, I mean the vast majority of Germans, would be at home watching that program. And I fondly, and even now, some of these programs conjure up these feelings of extreme, the German word is Gemütlichkeit, or even homeliness. Like, it's like a really very comforting kind of feeling. Like when I watch these shows that I watched back then with, I guess, 50 million other people at the same time, and that collective experience was really very, very homely, very, very comforting. And again, I get that same feeling still.
Like you said, so with only like 5 channels that we grew up with on television, and you were watching one of them, right? Because you couldn't watch a second on each, because so you're watching one of them, and those ratings drove the country. So whichever one rated the most was what the most collective experience was growing within the community. I think it's really important that to note that now we have 200 channels plus, or what have you, right? We've got unlimited YouTube and other distractions that we don't get at all any of that collective experience anymore.
Right.
I didn't even watch free to air anymore.
Yeah, look, not many people do it, and I think it's this fragmentation that we can now see expressed in our societies.
Mm-hmm.
This fragmentation, because look, I'm not an advocate for everybody thinking alike and whatever, but I do believe in a common purpose and a common morality and ethics and foundation for society. It's very difficult to have a society if you don't have some commonality in it, right?
That's right.
Now, diversity is good, don't get me wrong, but some of the base values should be the same. Like, we don't eat each other. That's a good one.
I like that one already.
Right? But because everybody now, and I mean everybody pretty much, has their own device, and they watch whatever they want, whenever they want, pretty much. This common experience is just a thing. In fact, I listened to a reporter the other day lamenting the decline of the cinema, and some, big movie houses trying to bring cinema back by delaying streaming services availability, for example, or even creating a cinema like it'd be foolish to watch movies like Indiana Jones or Avatar or such, not in the cinema. Because they're made for the cinema, right? The big screen, the big sound, etc. I mean, again, it's up to you what you want to do, but if you want to really experience the spectacle, you do it in the cinema, and you do it ideally with others. And believe it or not, actually it's a much more enjoyable experience. We are heading that way, but this fragmentation, I think, is hurting us. I think the fragmentation we're experiencing is hurting us.
Part of not ascending or reaching ascension is all about splitting up our thoughts so they're individual. You don't get that collective experience. You don't get that ascension.
That's it. You're exactly right. That is exactly right. So what they did cleverly was that, and then they doubled down with fires and the pandemic to really shake us up and lower the vibrational frequency for everybody. So the awareness cascade could not take place. I lament that it didn't.
Well, guess what? That's the end of the show. We've got Jer Bear coming up with his great show. You can catch Meki and I as Plato's Cave, 7 a.m. Eastern, on both Tuesday and Thursday, and then catch us once again next week as Shiny Side Out. Same time. Until then, take care.